Now next thing which we are going to study is called consumer price index. You see a lot of times it's called CPI. So today's lecture is going to be very important because there are a lot of key terms which we are going to discuss and they come repeatedly in the newspapers. Repeatedly. Okay. Consumer price index, CPI. See, yesterday we were finishing, that's why I couldn't tell you WPI index and all. Let's try to understand what is the basics of this. See, India is a very big country, or any country, it's very big. There are multiple commodities. Okay. And all these commodities are available at a price. But among those commodity students, there are some commodities which are general in nature. Let's say, for example, vegetables. So you also consume, Ambani also consumes that. Are you getting this? So what every nation wants is that to track the price rise, to track the inflation, to track among the price rise which is rising. Because if I come to know that, let's say yesterday we saw the example of tomatoes, I can see the price rise, but what is a specific commodity? It's tomato. So if I know that its tomato is rising, I can go for what? Imports. So among the commodities also you need to know what is that commodity. So that's why there are different types of indices which are developed from different perspectives. So we saw PPI, then we saw wholesale price index, so more in the terms of what wholesale trading and all. But now you know that more important is what? Consumer. Because ultimately we saw that in the initial start of the class, I told you the most important sector of the economy is what? Household sector, HH. Everything happens for household because all the other sectors ultimately retire where? Household only. Okay. So WPI was there, but now people felt that ki nahi yaar, WPI is not a true indicator. We want to understand the price rise from the perspective of a consumer, because it's the consumer who is the ultimate person who experiences goods as well as services. If the price rises, it hampers her or him. So we need to have some index. But the problem is that I told you there is too much diversity. So we need to take into understanding while designing an index the diversity also. So they will take into understanding the diversity of rural areas, the diversity of urban areas. So example, when I am designing an index, okay, for let's say urban area. So for urban people, okay, so milk is a very important commodity because for milk, they have to spend the money and take the milk. So milk will have a huge weightage in the urban areas. Or tea, which also requires milk and which is sold. So it's also a type of what transaction which happens here. So milk is a commodity which enjoys a higher weightage in the urban area because it comes in transaction. If the price of milk rises in the urban area, it is passed on to what? Consumers also. So milk rise or milk price rise hampers or affects urban consumers. But similarly, the same commodity milk, if we take in rural areas, it doesn't hamper that much. Why? Because in the rural areas, milk is what? Basically, or the source of milk is owned by the people themselves. Okay. Because cow, they are away from all this inflation and all. We have a cow, every day it gives 5 liters of milk. That's it. So I don't have money now. Okay, you give me after 1 month. So milk is not undergoing or milk is not undergoing transaction in a commercial manner. So when I am putting in my index or when I am designing my index and assigning priority to milk as a commodity, because milk is consumed by what? Urban also, rural also. So the weightage of the milk will be what? More in urban area, because the price rise of the milk is going to hamper more to the urban people than to the rural people. So milk is there in both rural as well as urban because it's consumed. But the weightage will be more for urban because the preferences of urban people vis-a-vis milk are different. They spend a huge income on milk. But for rural people, milk is important, but they don't spend too much. So the weightage would be less. Are you getting this? Similarly, I will put in index a component or a service known as housing. So you all came from, let's say, from some other place. Now you're staying here. You're paying what? Rent. So substantial part of income is going in what? Paying of rent. Are you getting this? You're paying the rent. No? So if the cost of housing rises, it will also impact your preparation here. So a lot of students who finish their course, they said, sir, we are going back because the cost is very high here. We'll prepare from home. Or we have asked Vinay sir that we'll take from online because here it's unbearable. The rents are rising too much. So the factor of housing in urban area will be having a more weightage in the form of rent. But similarly in the rural areas, that rental homes are very less. So the weightage would be less. Okay. So consumer price index, students, is nothing but designing a basket of commodities or selecting a basket of commodities, okay, in a generalistic manner as per the taste of that peculiar population. Example, if I design consumer price index CPI for urban, so I will select an index, just like you see in a book, index is there. I will select a basket of commodities and services which is more preferable in a general manner for the people living in what? Urban areas. Are you getting this? And let's say there is milk, let's say there is housing, let's say there is tobacco. Okay. So here if I just design it, so I will give a more weightage for housing here. Let's say the weightage would be, let's say 34%. Milk, the weightage would be, let's say 32%. Tobacco, people don't technically use tobacco here in the urban areas. So I will give weightage what? 2%. Like that. And ultimately when you see the weightages, they will all calculate to what? 100. Clear? So I selected a basket of goods and services which are preferably and generally consumed in urban areas, and I gave them a weightage depending upon their demand. Or if a price rises, if I say that in the urban area it's a price rise, which commodity leads to more price rise? That is how I selected a basket of commodities. How selection is done? It's like this. Similarly, students, if I go for CPI rural, again I will design, or again I will select a basket of commodities. But now the basket of commodities which I selected and the weightage which I assign to those goods and services will be dependent upon the taste or the standard of life or the way of life of the rural population. Example, let's say here milk is there. I wrote housing also. I wrote tobacco also. Okay, so milk here weightage was 32%, but here I will give what? Just 18%. Because technically milk is available there. So the price rise will not hamper the milk prices there in the rural area. Housing. People own their own houses. So I will, here it was 34, I will give, let's say 12%. Tobacco, here people eat more. So I will give what? Here 2%. Here I will give 6%. This is how I design a basket of commodities, and ultimately if I calculate all this weight, it will come around 100. That's it. Okay. So when they say inflation is rising or CPI is 6%, that means what? The price is rising around 6%. Or inflation is 8%. That means that the price rise is what? 8%. And yesterday we just discussed faintly that India has a mandate of 4 plus or minus 2%. And this 4%, students, is nothing but what? CPI. Okay. So the price rise in India, RBI has to make sure, as we go ahead, you will come to know. RBI has to make sure that the price rise in India on a yearly basis, it should be within the bracket of what? 2% to 6%. And this 2% and 6% are nothing but what? It's called CPI combined. CPI combined means what? You mix the goods and services of urban and rural and design a general index. That's it. So RBI, as per via its monetary policy, see, always remember that two things. Whenever we talk about RBI, it will be what? Monetary policy. Whenever we talk about government, it would be what? Fiscal policy. RBI, monetary policy, government, fiscal policy. Are you getting this? So RBI via its monetary policy has to make sure that inflation remains in the band of what? 2% to 6%. That is permissible. If it goes beyond 6%, then it's a reason of worry. They have to take the steps depending upon whether the inflation is demand pull inflation or cost push inflation, and try to bring that inflation within this bracket. If let's say it becomes 1%, again they have to take some steps so that inflation comes in this bracket. That's it. When we go into monetary policy, we'll delve more into that. But the task of maintaining, even in the formal manner, is with RBI 2 to 6%, but it's also the task of government also. Example we took of what? Tomatoes or the onion. So if the cost of onions, because if onions becomes costly, it's an example we'll see today, skewflation. But onions are used in your bhel, onions are used in your all dishes. So ultimately the cost of dishes also goes up. So that means what? Your food prices go up. But RBI has what? Banking system under its hand. Even RBI does anything via its monetary policy, it's not going to hamper your tomatoes or your onion. So the task of handling such price rise goes into now the domain of what? Fiscal policy of government. The government via its fiscal policy should either import more tomatoes or onion. Then there will be what? Demand and supply will reach equilibrium. Are you getting this? The formula, it seems that maintenance of inflation within this band of CPI, that is 2% to 6%, is the responsibility of RBI, but also government pays a huge part to maintain it. Clear? That is what that IAS officer wrote. When everybody was abusing RBI, that is unable to control the monetary policy or inflation, that officer told that you should have some sense. You are blaming RBI for what? Rise of cost of onion. What will RBI do? Will Shaktikanta Das open his own shop of onion? Or stand in what? Chandra layout? Take onion 5 rupees, 2 rupees. It is a task of government. What he will do? He can put more money. Already the money is already there via banking. So now the government should act. Don't abuse him. He is to bichara not faulty. It's the government which is faulty. Start abusing government. The next article, everybody started abusing government. Got it? Then again, government should do this, faulty policies, this and that. So whenever they talk about inflation, students, in today's time, inflation, it's what this? Consumer price index. You know how the index is designed? A basket of commodities which are assigned weightage depending upon what? Your preferences of that particular area. Here it's regional, urban and rural. And they also have a combined where they mix urban and rural both. You're getting this? But government uses what? Only urban also, only rural also. So only rural when they use for rural policies, and only urban when they're looking at the policies of urban. And when generalistically for India they want to make a bigger or a macro policy, they use what? Combined. Okay. Similarly, there is a CPI. Okay, there is a CPI now for agriculture laborers. Now you know, it depends upon what? It's trying to track the prices from the perspective of whom? Agriculture laborers who are consumers, because it's a consumer price index. Because in India still feudalism continues in different forms, and at the lowest rung of the hierarchy it's our what? Agriculture laborers. Okay, then again they calculate CPI from the perspective of what? Industrial workers also. Clear? So there are a lot of types of CPI, but basically what India uses what? CPI urban, CPI rural, and for general policy making they use CPI combined. Okay, a basket of commodities depending upon the general preference of urban and rural. That's it. And you know that now it tracks the prices from the perspective of what? Consumer. Because consumer or customer is the king. Every policy which a government makes, every monetary policy which RBI makes is for what? Consumer. Is for what? A consumer who belongs to the sector known as HH, household. Clear? So it's better to track the prices from the perspective of consumer. Are you getting this? Because these are the people who are voters also. Okay, so they say now you have political equality. You are a political being. You are also economic and social being also. So government understood that. Clear? And now just so we saw PPI, we saw WPI, now we saw CPI. Okay. So earlier students, the government was using what to target? WPI. That means what? Tracking inflation or tracking general price rise from the perspective of what? Wholesalers. But I told you, wholesalers again, it doesn't give a true picture of the economy. And again we saw that it only consists of 697 items we saw. Isn't it divided into 3 parts? Then the government felt that no, we need to track the inflation or the rise in prices from the perspective of consumers. So then government officially declared that henceforth we will use CPI to target inflation. Okay, that means what we saw, na 2% to 6%. What? CPI. So the student, the index which is used by government officially to control inflation or to monitor inflation, it is known as headline inflation. It is known as headline inflation. Headline inflation. So now today, students, when they write in the newspapers, headline inflation is 8%. That means what? CPI combined is what? 8%. Because CPI is designated by the government as headline inflation. Earlier, what was headline inflation? WPI. Now the government changed it to what? CPI. So headline inflation is nothing but the inflation officially used by government for policy making or tracking the inflation. Designated. Now the designated is what? CPI. Clear? Earlier it was what? WP. So headline you will see a lot of time. Headline CPI or sometimes headline inflation. So whenever they say headline, it's what? CPI combined. Clear? One more term, students, you will see something known as core inflation. Somebody asked me yesterday, core. So students, whenever we see inflation, there are two important items within inflation which make inflation rise like anything or which inflates the inflation itself. These two items are what? Food and fuel. So food, if you see, if monsoons are better, immediately the prices go down. If the monsoons are not better, prices go up. Let's say exports are stopped because of the geopolitical crisis, food prices go up. So food and fuel are two items which are very politically unstable. And as they are unstable politically, economically, it creates a chaos in the price tracking. Because today the food is easy, after 1 week the food again goes down, again it rises up. And again, see, when you produce these figures, it's after 1 month. You'll see that when they are published after 1 month. So there are two items which is known as food and fuel which are very unstable within your basket of commodities. So the government says that their food and fuel are very unstable. So let's keep for the time being food and fuel out because their prices go on up and down. If your currency changes, again up and down because we import fuel. So if currency rate changes, let's say tomorrow Trump says something and they raises the then again it hampers us. So government says that this food and fuel are very unstable. So let's keep it aside for some time and really see what is leading to the rise of inflation or what is the core that the price rises have risen up. So when students, from the headline inflation, you remove the component of food and fuel, you say that the inflation is what? Core inflation. So in our case, what would be the core inflation? Core inflation would be when CPI combined is our headline minus so you are removing the component of price rise in food and fuel and just considering the remaining items. That is known as core inflation. So core inflation is the inflation which you measure minus food and fuel because food and fuel are very unstable. Go up, down, up, down. Yesterday the fuel is very high. Today the fuel has gone down. Again food is high, food has gone down. Are you getting this? Let's say something happened. Let's say some landslide happened for 1 week, no transportation. But after let's say clearing, again food starts coming. So food price go down. So it's very unstable. So that's why you remove the component of food and fuel, and then you calculate inflation. Then you come to know really what is leading to the rise of inflation, whether it's manufacturing goods or something XYZ. Then the policy can be made more better. That is known as core inflation. So we got two things: headline inflation, we got core inflation. Core inflation is nothing but headline inflation minus food and fuel. Why? You know why they minus it. Clear? You got it? CPI, you got consumer price index. Yes. WPI we saw 697 clubbed into what? 3 major sections. And depending upon what weightage they have given. Clear? Let's write down. And remember that here also students there is a base year. For WPI, the base year was 2011-12. You know what is base year now? That means what? Let's say I want to compare WPI. So I need some stick I need some basis. The base year is the basis. That is what 2011-12 for WPI. Similarly, if I want to check inflation from the perspective of consumer, so you use what? CPI. Again, I want to compare vis-a-vis with somebody. That somebody is what? Base year. Here the base year of CPI is what? 2012.